Hi, welcome to this webinar on planning long-term user adoption in Microsoft Teams and SharePoint. One of the hardest things you can do is actually get it embedded in the school, get people using it really well. It is difficult. You're going to be changing the way that people have worked for many, many years, even due to the pandemic and that steep learning curve most people have had to make. It's still really difficult to make sure that you bring everybody on that journey with you in the school. So what we're going to do in this discussion today is just talk about some of the tactics you can use to get that long-term strategy so you get good user adoption throughout the entire school. So this is a bit about myself and the company that I work for. So we're Office 365 specialists, we're CPD certified, we have CPD certified training courses, and we're Microsoft Global Education Training Partner. So just to quickly go over sort of why we're having this talk is one problem that we see in many schools, no matter what VLE or online learning system they have, it's normally the case that you'll have a few tech-savvy teachers in the school using it really well, doing some amazing things with it, whatever it is, whether it's Firefly, SharePoint, Teams, Frog, whatever it is in the school. You always have that core of teachers who use it really well and do those amazing things with it. But for the rest of the staff, you don't always get that user adoption. And the main reason for it isn't the platform that they're using, it's just about the school having that long-term plan, that strategy to get it used well in the school over the long term. Now, because this is a big change for the school and for every member of staff, it can be difficult to make sure that you bring everybody on that journey with you. So we'll look at some of the key points today about how you can make this part of a long-term strategy to get it used well throughout the school and throughout all the staff, whether they're teaching or admin staff. So to start off, let's have a look at that journey and what it looks like in reality. So this is a journey that we've planned out so that you get that good user adoption over the long term. And you'll see there's lots of different steps that you need to make sure that you follow so that you bring everybody on that journey with you to using the cloud. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you communicate that vision to the school so they know exactly what's coming, they know exactly where you're going and what your long-term plan is. But it's also important to not overwhelm teachers and staff that you're going to make these changes instantly and actually give them some time to move over to these new ways of working. And during that time period, make sure that you give people the training so that they're confident using the new system. And again, this might not happen overnight. It might be over several months. It could even be a year plan or longer. But we know that there's some quick wins. But in the end, this is a long-term strategy. It's a long-term journey because actually you're not changing the way that school works just for the COVID situation, just for the pandemic, but actually moving to cloud. What many schools were doing that before February because of all those benefits of moving to cloud. Accessing documents from anywhere on any device. There's also the massive savings on the file servers that you might have in school. This should be the journey anyway, and I know that it's been rushed because of COVID, but it's still important to take a step back, think about that long-term strategy, make sure that you've got a solution in place that isn't just for this 1 year, but actually is going to be ongoing. And when you come to rolling over to the next academic year, you've still got a solution in place that is scalable, that still works following you, and teachers aren't having to redo all their work again. Because that's one of the things that will crush enthusiasm, is if teachers have more work to do because of a solution and not less. So you need to communicate that vision to a school, what that long-term plan is. Make sure that you give key people ownership over the project. So we would recommend creating that group of champions who are going to work together on that project. Then there'll be some curriculum leads, so you get some uptake from the teachers themselves and some leaders within their departments. And that's going to help give them some ownership over the project because they feel that they're part of it. They're more likely to take part and actually contribute to it if they feel that they've had some input into the way that it's set up and into the way that it's going to work long term. So definitely make sure that you have those key people involved at the planning stage before you even get to the rollout phase. The next bit is creating that long-term plan with the milestone date. So like we said, it's not going to happen overnight. You need to make sure that you have some key dates in place. It might be 6 months, you're going to make your file shares read only, and in a year, you're going to turn them off, or at least pretend to turn them off. So you give staff that clear time frame, and you provide the training and measure that training during that period of time. And it doesn't have to be a year. It could be, a few months. You might make it much shorter, and it's really going to depend on your school and your staff and where they currently sit. And remember, it's not just about those tech savvy staff, it's about all of them within the organisation and not just teaching staff. So again, it might be a case you want to survey teachers to find out what their current ability level is and their confidence is, and that can help you plan that long-term strategy documents. So we then need to make sure that we support the staff with some user adoption training. So make sure that staff have that training. We need to make sure that that training is also evaluated afterwards, so you can measure the success, and you can also feed back into that long-term digital strategy. Are there any barriers to using it in the classroom? We need to know about them as early as possible so they don't get buried, so you don't get staff not using it in the future. So it's about having that constant feedback loop of doing the training, measuring its success and any issues, the good and the bad information, feeding that back into your long-term digital strategy, adjusting it. It might be the fact that you're going too fast or too slow, and making sure that you have that flexible plan in place, because your original plan might not work in reality. So we just need to be realistic. We need to keep going back to it, adjusting it, so that over the long term you get that good user adoption. And then the ongoing adjustments to digital strategy and plan, like I say, it just needs to be a flexible plan that you have in place. So when we're communicating that vision to the school, we need to highlight several things. One of those is going to be some of those learning outcomes, which is going to be the most important thing. How is it going to improve learning in your vision? What will learning look like? What will the new reality look like in a year's time, 2 years' time, when this plan has been implemented? So what are those learning outcomes? What are the other benefits to the school? So, will it obviously cost saving is great, but how does that change the way that somebody works? So it might be the case that people can work from home easier. They're not having to turn on a laptop and open up a VPN to get access to their documents. They can just grab their phone, quickly open a document, and it saves them time. So again, the benefits, when you drill down, what are the actual benefits? They mainly come down to saving time, making your life easier. So we need to highlight those benefits and how they look. And then you also need to make sure that any of these visions that also fit in with the school ethos and culture. So you don't want to copy this vision from another school. You want to make this vision your own, because every school has their own ethos and culture, and really this should lock in with that. So what is your ethos, and how will this digital strategy support that? So it's definitely worth thinking about that when you're planning out that vision and you're communicating it to the school. So as part of planning that vision and planning that long-term scalability, one thing that you're going to want to look at is, how are we actually going to plan out these sites? So it's important to maybe use some spreadsheets, collate a list of sites that you want to create that are actually going to be scalable going forwards. We don't want everybody creating their own site where there's no central governance over that, because that isn't going to work long term. It might work short term, for a short school closure, but it's not going to work long term. It's not going to change the way that your school works. So it's really important that you get that key team of people together, like say some curriculum champions, some people from SLT, and they work with you to create that long-term plan. And that might be using a spreadsheet to plan out the different departments and sites that you might have in school that need their own area inside Teams and SharePoint. But it's also going to be about making sure that you've got that plan in place so that you separate out the different types of sites, so that you're planning for long-term usage and not short-term. So what I'll do is I'll show you a quick demo of what this vision might look like. This is one of the sites that we sort of plan out, but obviously you can do your own as well. So when we first log in, we're coming to SharePoint, And this is sort of the key communication place for everybody within the school. So it's a place where you can publish information to large groups of people in the organisation, whether it's students, whether it's staff. And we jump into Teams when it comes to collaboration and working with other people. So if we open up the menu at the top of here, just so I can easily describe to you the different types of sites and teams that you will need long term, what I've done is I've ordered these by the different types of sites. So you've got communication sites inside SharePoint, and like I said, those are for publishing information to those large groups of people within the organisation. So it might be something like a staff site where you're publishing policy documents and staff briefings, anything where you've got some members of staff who can edit and publish those documents, but most people are going to be consuming them. So things like IT support services we've got on there, where you might have user guides and help guides. There might be a library service where it's a bit about the library and how it all works. And again, these are publishing sites that you're controlling what is published to those audiences. And those really would replace maybe a traditional intranet that you might have had in school previously. When it comes to your non-curricular teams, your collaboration teams, these are for small groups of people working together inside your organisation. So these will be, like I say, secure areas that nobody else can see except if you're in those teams. So it might be things like the finance team, data team. They might have their own little folder on your shared drives at the moment, and that would translate into a team. Now, one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to create a mess that you might already have on your current file structure inside your new scalable platform long-term solution. So one thing to think about when you are planning out these sites is not to replicate exactly what you have on site at the moment, but think about those teams of people that work together inside the school. So it might be, the finance team might work together, but on your actual shared drives, there might be a finance folder, and inside that finance folder, there's a payroll folder that only 2 members of finance can actually see and other people can't. Now, what we're trying to do here is create a flat structure that means we can scale it up going forwards. It's easy to maintain, and it's really simple. You're a member of a team, you get put in that team, you can see every document in that team. So in the case of that finance team where they've got a payroll folder that only certain people can see, we will then split that out actually into 2 different teams, a finance team and a payroll team, and some people can be in both, some people can just be in one of them. So when you're planning it out, it's important not to replicate exactly what you've got, because we want to make sure it's definitely scalable and manageable moving forwards. But definitely have a look at the content you have already got and where will it fit in this new structure that you're planning. And don't forget, you don't have to get it right straight away, but it's just important to get that wireframe, those initial sites planned out really well, because when it comes to actually using this, you want to make sure that people have confidence with it and that the initial sites are going to be useful and worthwhile and structured correctly. But if you forget any sites, you can always come in and add them later. You don't have to get it all right at the beginning. Again, it's about having that feedback process so we can make those changes over time. You've then got your subject sites or subject teams, and these are areas which are going to contain your long-term resources. So, you might have used class teams during lockdown and you might still be using them. And those are great for that one academic year. But when it comes to actually rolling over, you don't want to be duplicating that work. And actually a teacher might teach, 4 year 11 English classes every single academic year. They don't have to upload their resources and manage the resources in 4 different locations every single academic year. That's a lot of extra work that they just don't need to do. And for heads of department, you need somewhere to check on the quality of that work in some sort of central location. So the idea behind creating your subject teams or subject SharePoint sites is that you have that central place where you can store all your resources and get those curriculum leaders involved in the planning of these sites. So you know whether you're going to use student-facing year group resource libraries or Key Stage. Give them some options so they have a bit of ownership over these sites when you're planning them out. And remember, those subject resource teams, they're going to be there for years and years to come. They're going to really scale up. So it's really important that those are there first. Those are there as that central resource area, and then you can use them when you're planning out your assignments in Teams, when you're grabbing resources for those teams. You can grab them from that central place. You're not having to recreate them, download them, upload them, and all that extra work that teachers might feel they're currently having to do with class teams. And then obviously you've got your class teams, and they're great for that collaboration with that individual class. Great for extending the classroom, even post-COVID. So again, don't think of Teams as a solution just for lockdown. Plenty of schools were using it before then, and there's some great tools in there. So, engaging with students who might be too shy to put their hands up in class or too afraid to speak in front of other people, they can chat in the Teams conversation channel. So again, it's including those students. If you want to set them a homework, again, you might be paying for other third-party services. And again, there's another great free solution inside Teams that lets you set that work and return it back again. So again, that's really what we're looking at when we're planning out this long-term solution, is making sure that you've got that structure in place. Make sure you've got those long-term resource areas so people aren't duplicating their workload. And that's why it's important to take a step back. Even if you're already using Teams, think about that long-term solution, because now people are using Teams. They're not going to all of a sudden stop using it in a year's time. And it gives you a chance to really push the school forward in terms of digital strategy and getting them using things like cloud computing, and getting all the benefits of that. Now, here's a quick example of how you might introduce your vision and merge that with some of the ethos and values of the school. This is a quick example of a way that one school has done that. So they've talked about developing independent learning, which is one of their values at the school. And they've talked about supporting student engagement with the curriculum and making it easy for the students. So again, it's just sort of merging, the communication about the vision of it with your own message that the school has in terms of ethos and values. So we talked earlier about giving key people ownership over the project, and this is what a typical project team might look like. So some of the people to get involved will be people like curriculum representatives. You need somebody from the teacher learning side of things to have some ownership over it, because those are the people that you want to drive user adoption with the most. So actually having them in some of these planning meetings means that they get some ownership over it. They're more involved in the project, they're more enthusiastic about it, and they're going to communicate that back to their curriculum areas. You also probably want to involve an MIS manager, and the reason for that is when you're looking at your different subject areas and which teams belong to which subjects, you need to know what those subjects are in the school and how you're going to plan them out. And then you're probably going to want to also involve, if you've got a head of digital strategy or a member of SLT who's taken on that responsibility for drawing up this plan, they obviously need to be involved. And your IT team, they need to be there for support in terms of technical implementation. And just looking at that long-term plan in a bit more detail, so it needs to be realistic. So don't try and make these, make this plan too short. Remember that you need to include all staff and bring all staff on this journey with you. So even if it's longer than most people want, I would say try and be realistic with it. Remember that it's an ongoing plan, so it's not that we're going to do nothing until that time. It's about working on it and making sure everybody is confident with it by that end date. So make it realistic dates, and put in those milestone dates as well. So it could be the fact that servers get made into read-only mode after 6 months. Maybe they get switched off another 6 months later. So staff can use both methods in their classroom, in their daily lives, until they're confident with it, and make sure that obviously you have the training in there to support that timeline. There's no point giving people dates so they're not giving them the support so that they feel confident to actually move over before then. And remember, be flexible. Make sure you get that feedback. So if there are problems, if people aren't quite ready for it yet, adjust those dates. Be flexible with it. You don't have to have these set in stone. It's about having that constant feedback. This is a journey that you're going on. If it takes longer, it takes longer. If it goes quicker, then great. But it's just making sure that you make sure that everybody is, confident with it in the long run. And just looking at the training again in a bit more detail. When you do this training, make sure it's not PowerPoint driven, where everybody is watching a webinar and nobody is actually taking part. These need to be workshops. People need hands-on training because they need to get confident with it, and the only way they're going to get confident with it is actually by doing and having the support there when they get stuck. So keep them to small groups of staff. It could be between 15 and 30. Imagine it's you're teaching a group of students. You wouldn't put them all in the hall watching our presentation, expect them to gain those skills, those real life skills. So it's about having those small classes of staff, making sure they're grouped by ability level, because that's going to make it easier in terms of the pace of the session and exactly what level of detail you go into. Split them with teaching and non-teaching staff, because some stuff is going to be relevant for teaching staff, like setting assignments, but it's not going to be relevant for somebody in the finance department. So make sure that you split up your groups and you plan those out carefully as part of a training needs analysis. And pick which topics you're going to focus on. Not everybody needs to focus on the same topics. So again, some teaching staff might do a deep dive into Teams assignments, while other staff might just use the basics of sharing inside SharePoint. So it's about planning out those topics. And again, it's not a one-off training session. You need to go back and train staff on other topics, give them refreshers. Again, make sure that everybody is happy and confident before you move on to the next stage of your plan. Another question to ask is, do you need to train students? Are students going to pick this up by following the instructions of teachers in their classroom, by following their form tutor instructions? Are they just going to pick these things up naturally because that's maybe what they do in your school? Or do you need specific training for students? So that is something to think about as well. So it's really important to measure success and what that looks like. And you can do that really easily using something like Microsoft Forms. So measuring how well your training's gone, getting some feedback from it, we can just open up Microsoft Forms. We can create a quick survey, and it could just be a couple of questions like this. And then we can just send it out to staff after they've attended those training sessions. It's important then to revisit those responses, see what you can improve on, feed that back into your long-term digital strategy. So this is sort of a bit of a cycle of that strategy. I say we go train staff, measure their progress, and then adjust that strategy, and have that constant feedback loop over a long period of time to make sure that we get that confidence, get that user adoption across everybody in school. So that's just a quick recap of what we've covered today. So communicate that vision to the school, give key people ownership over that project, make a long-term plan with those important dates while you're training up staff, giving them the confidence during those time periods. And then make sure that you measure that success, feeds back into your long-term digital strategy, and just make those constant adjustments so that you're making those incremental steps to getting good cloud usage within the school over the long term. So I've put some useful resources on the screen. There's even a QR code, so if you scan that with your phone, it'll bring up our website, and on our website you'll find under the resources tab, you'll find lots of free training guides, podcasts, little blog posts as well with little tips on how to start video lessons and other things like that. So take a look at those resources, and I hope that they're useful. And feel free to get in contact with us if you do need help with that long-term digital strategy. If you need long-term help, if you need help with creating those long-term subject teams and intranet sites, we can help you with that process as well. So thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to get in contact with any of those methods on the screen.